Plinth Project lunch talk. So I'm Joey Côté-Rancourt, co-curator in sustainability here at FOFA. Arrien Weeks, the designer of the Modular Plinth that we are here to talk about. So I'll introduce Arrien quickly. So Arrien Weeks, aka Chapeau Vert, his designer name, is a designer, educator, and consultant working in sustainability. He co-founded CUCCR here, and he has a master in art education, and he holds a degree in multidisciplinary design and industrial design. So Arrien and FOFA team kind of got together and had that idea to develop that plinth that would be reused and easier to store everything. But
So yeah, Joey talked about most of these things already. And I've been reusing for probably most of my life. This is me at about age 4 or 5 in the backyard as I grow up. I think these are some yogurt containers, and I think this is a tuna can that my mom gave me to play out in the sandbox. I'm also a father. I do lots of renovations when I'm not here or elsewhere doing talks. Sometimes gardener, curious forager, and I cook on the daily in as much a sustainable way as I can. So I have a love-hate relationship with 3D printing. These are all, if not all, those are all 3D printed parts. And 3D printing has taken over the world in the last 10 to 15 years. And it has a lot of potential, but it also has a lot of potential for harm. And we're already seeing that. It's playing into the plastics crisis that we're in on a global scale. This is not fabric at all. This is fully 3D printed. What looks like a knit hippopotamus, but it is not. It's plastic. And it's a tricky one because it has a lot of potential to help us on a global scale as well, to repair things that are otherwise unfixable because the part doesn't exist anymore. So as a tool, I think it has a lot of potential. But like with the little plastic hippo, it has a lot of potential to get out of hand. We're already seeing that. And it's playing into the plastic crisis we're in. So today, hopefully by the end, we can talk about how we can use it as better as a tool and the potential of it going forward. And maybe recycling even the plastic that was already printed to work on this project. So we'll come back to that in a bit. So the origins is way before Nicole and I even started talking about plinths. This is the original space that CUCCR started in. It's about a 600 square foot storage cage here in the hall building on campus, and this is before it even opened the doors. So it opened, actually, what is the date today? It's the 18th. So almost 8 years ago, the Reuse Center opened in this space. It was March 22nd, 2017. And a lot of the pieces or the parts, materials that ended up being the shelving and so on that would hold the materials that the center gives away were made from plinths or plinth-like objects. So these are exhibition boxes. There's some more here that came from the design department at that time, from past exhibitions, mostly undergraduate exhibitions that they had. And luckily they had held on to them for a number of years, and then when we were opening, we're like, hey, do you want to come into the storage closet and take these materials and have fun with them? And so that allowed us to make a lot of those shelving units with those things. And so that's sort of the seed of how do we look at exhibition furniture differently started for me. And it kind of grew from there in the more recent years is how do we look at modularity with plinths. So over the course of my time at the center, I would have technicians that would come to me and say, hey, do you want some plinths? Because there was plinths coming from this gallery and other galleries on campus that didn't want them anymore, or they had been created specifically for an exhibition and it didn't really serve, or at least it didn't serve any purpose at that time to the gallery spaces. So it's sort of, that planted another seed in my mind. How can we think about these things modularly? And so I came upon this product, which probably at one time was a 3D printed object on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. It's now a product that you can buy. I bought it here through Lee Valley. And I'll pass it around. It's using its own bolt system. And so, but I found that to be very big. It's very chunky, right? And so part of the thing that we started to talk about with 𝘮𝘢𝘯𝘪𝘯𝘨 and Josh and others and Nicole and Jasmine, the previous person working on sustainability here at the gallery, was how do we still get that sort of gallery aesthetic, but at the same time like push the boundaries of what gallery aesthetic is? Because right now, I mean, we're in this white space and these white boxes. There's a plinth over there. There's a low plinth over here, very white. No, like you can't. There's no seams on the corners. So how do we start to play with that a little bit? And some of the other ones, back in 2023, the Reuse Center had its annual artist residency, and one of the artists wanted to create an enclosure to play with recycling plastic. And so at that time, I found and 3D printed some corners so that we could upcycle some actually COVID barrier plexiglass into this enclosure so that they can experiment safely to play with melting styrofoam into a new material. That was Ev Ricky at the time. And then the model was, I didn't design it, it was already available online. Another one online that I came upon was this one from Cro-Magnon. Also, I found this to be very, very big. And we wanted to, as I was sort of looking at these parts, we wanted to look at something a little less chunky, a little bit more subtle. This one is, everything is 3D printed, so including the little Allen key that assembles it all together, which is an interesting concept, and you're not having to worry about finding an Allen key. And that sort of played into the future of what would be developed here, is how do we use fasteners, screws, and things like that, screwdrivers that we already have access to keep things relatively simple. And one of the last inspirations was Ply 90. This was meant to be a product that you could buy. For one reason or another, it didn't make it to market. They did a small run of them, and unfortunately you can no longer purchase them, but somebody somewhere recreated the 3D model, and so you can 3D print this product if you wanted to out of plastic. But this was completely metal, which, thinking to the future, is maybe an option for the connectors here. So these are some of the current plinths here at the gallery. The plinth that was upcycled into the plinth for the show here that's going on right now is this one. I believe it's 17A on the Excel sheet. And so one of the biggest challenges was how do we give new life to some of these plinths. This one, I think, in the sheet was marked as like, not usable, don't put this out on the floor. So how do we give new life to old plinths that exist? Because they're still valuable material, still has potential. And the other biggest challenge with the project was storage. These plinths take up room. Most of these are about 2 feet square by about 3 feet tall. You start stacking those up, or even if you don't stack them up, they take up a lot of room. Joy and Josh and I went down to the storage room earlier this year or late last year, and it takes up a lot of room. You don't have a lot of room for much else. So that's one of the other challenges that we wanted to face, was how, by making something modular, something collapsible, we can actually reduce the amount of space that we need to store the plinths. Also, you can sort of mix and match, or that's the idea, is that by having so many of this size and so many of this size, you can put a plinth of the size that you're looking for together fairly quickly. So this is where it's alive. This is where we started. And so I took number 17A and approached it thinking, okay, well, what generally kinds of tools do galleries have access to? They might not always have a shop space. So in this instance, I think it's in the next slide, or these are some of the sketches, but in the instance of 17A, used a circular saw with a guide on it and really broke down the box. So it shrunk a little bit, but not by much. And we'll get to how I broke it down some more in a moment. So taking all the inspiration of the parts, the pieces, the products that already existed out there, and thinking about smaller, and then coming up with, this was prototype number 1, which was way too small. It started to break when tightened inside the box, and with the way that 3D printing works, it's sort of a bi-layer, right? So depending on how you orient your part in the machine, it'll have more strength in one direction than another. This one was actually printed, if I can just have that for a second. It was printed like this. So the layers are sort of like this. So if you put pressure on these sort of, let's call them fins, they will start to bend more than if it was printed in this direction, because it has more strength on it. And this is kind of the beauty of 3D printing, is you can do these tests, right? It's not a finished product that you need to go to a manufacturer for. You can print out these tests and sort of see. I think almost immediately as I printed it out, I was like, okay, it's going to work, but it's way too small. Maybe I hadn't done design in a while, but my sense of scale was off in my mind, I guess. So I continued sketching and developing the next iteration. So this is the one that's going around, is this version here, and then it slowly developed into the final, or the version that we have out right now on the floor, prototype number 2. So bigger and able to keep the panels of the plinth together. It's also using an off-the-shelf. I went to Rona and bought nuts and bolts, so it's off-the-shelf. It's not something hard to find for other gallery spaces, other exhibition spaces. This is also, I'm using a 3D modeling program called Fusion 360, but I'm using a version that's free. So it's a for makers kind of version. So you have a limit of how many models you can make. I think it's up to 10. But you're not limited, and it's a pretty robust program to be able to use. In some ways, I think it's actually easier than a lot of the free programs that are out there. a lot of the free programs for 3D modeling are a lot more sculptural based, and it can be it can be difficult to understand how to use them. So here's some of that testing with the model number 1. You can see here slightly that it's cracking and starting to fail. This obviously wasn't enough material to hold from the inside. The reason why this is so long is we wanted structure on the top of the box to be able to hold the lid. So to hold the lid without attachment, that it just needs a structure underneath to sit. Because once you start needing to attach it, then you're going to end up with a clamp along the top edge. And through discussions with Maria and Josh and Joey, we wanted to try to keep the top as clean as possible, sort of keep with that original gallery plinth aesthetic. So then I started playing really with 17A, and the layers and layers of plaster and paint that were on it. We can see it here actually, how many layers there are. So that's before plaster removal, and then this is afterwards. At some point it was black, the box. And then it was into sanding and painting and getting it back to more or less nice. It's still a little rough, to be perfectly honest. But the connectors, the corner connectors, seem to be working much better than the previous prototype. And so it really brought the box together. And just as this show, the current show, the undergraduate show, was setting up, we set up the plinth in the space. So here's, we're putting it together fully for the first time in the space, and you can see the lid doesn't have any connectors on it. Here we're using a drill just for time's sake, but it could be assembled with just a Robertson, a square screwdriver. So future versions, looking at maybe using recycled plastic. So PLA is the most common plastic type that's used in 3D printing around the world. It stands for polylactic acid, and usually corn derived. So in some cases food source derived, which isn't the best approach in terms of creating a material, but that's the origins of that plastic. And so one of the ideas is to find a recycled version, maybe even one that's made here in Canada. As you all know, we're facing a very interesting time economically because of what's happening in the States. So the more that we can do and create things for ourselves, the better off we'll be. The other idea is to work with, grind up all the parts that were made to make the prototypes, and create a mold and actually make the parts much like the first. Where is it now? Who's holding all the first? So making a mold much like would be the mold for this part, and produce it in a small run to make it that way. The thing there that we would have to face though is it would not be white anymore. It would be very multicolored. Same with the recycled PLA. Recycled PLA, you're mixing colors together. It's hard to stay uniform when you're creating recycled plastic. So things to face again is, will people accept it if there's these wild connectors on the corners of your plinths? Another one that I've been exploring is whitewashing rather than painting, whitewashing, so using plant-based whitewash to stain the plywood. So you still have that sort of gallery aesthetic, but not quite. And the idea would be to use it in tandem or in partnership with, I'm saying quote-unquote compostable plywood because I haven't delved completely into the research behind it, but there is plywood on the market that uses soy-based adhesives. So technically you could put the sheet in the earth and the whole thing would be able to go back to the earth. The downside of that is it's the only place that carries it here in Canada or here in Quebec so far is Home Depot. And Home Depot in the United States gave a lot of money to the Trump campaign. So I don't shop there anymore because I don't agree with anything that's happening with that administration. So the search continues to see if maybe we do have a manufacturer here called Goodfellow that does produce plywood. So looking into them and seeing if they have a similar product out there. So those are some of the approaches, maybe even just keeping it untreated plywood altogether, and sort of having good conversations with gallery folk to sort of let's bend the rules a little bit and play with something different. So that is, wow, I probably went really fast. Well, but that's sort of it in a nutshell. I really want to, for anybody that has questions or anything about the process so far, or how we can bend the rules.